My family and I travelled to the West Country on holiday, and as we travelled down the M4, it was about lunchtime, and I wanted to get off the motorway, avoid the service stations and go somewhere into the country. And we went off the M4 and we came upon a small town, a town that was very familiar, the name to me, because I'd seen it on the news so many times. That town's name is Wootton Bassett, now known as Royal Wootton Bassett. And as we entered the town, as well as being familiar with the name of it and having seen it on the TV a lot, I noticed that there was posters all around the town of a big event on. And the big event, when I checked it out, was that very day we travelled into the town. And when I looked at the timing of the event, it was within the next hour. And I said to my family, we'll never get a better chance to pay our respects than this. And so I found a place somehow to park up the car, and we lined the streets, because of course Wootton Bassett was the place where for a number of years, when a serviceman or woman fell in conflict abroad, they were repatriated, their body was repatriated to the nearby RAF base, and then their body was taken through that town, and everyone lined the streets to pay respects. And it was a wonderful privilege, a very sad and poignant privilege to be there, a very moving moment as we saw the cortege pass through and we paid the respects due to that person who gave their life for their country. And as we saw the coffin with the Union Jack draped around it, we were touched to the core. A very powerful experience. And we do something of that today on Remembrance Day. We remember those who have gone before us, those who have paid the ultimate price. I know there are many of us from different nations. We may have all sorts of memories, maybe even loved ones who have passed away in war. Maybe we've even been part of one of those conflicts ourselves. It's a very moving day when we need to pay the true and proper respect for all of those who have paid the ultimate price. And it's also a sad reminder that, of course, wars go on right as we speak, whether in the Ukraine or in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, in Myanmar, in Somalia, in Democratic Republic of Congo, and many other nations. There's still, sadly, wars going on, and a lot needs to be done for peace. But above all, we remember those who died, that we are blessed with peace in this country at this moment. Now, we may have all sorts of views about what wars are just and what aren't, but I guess that most of us here, maybe all of us here, would acknowledge that Hitler had to be stopped. That the tyranny and ruthlessness and evilness of his regime and his attempts basically to control the world had to be dealt with. And we owe a special debt of gratitude to those who fought both on the front and in this nation in that particular conflict. And of course, we look back at the First World War, which of course ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, and it's why we're here today. But war, as awful as it is, does remind us of two things. Firstly, that the world isn't all as it should be, that the world is in a mess. And then the very first chapter, the first book of the Bible, it tells us that God created human beings, man and woman, in his own image. So that when we look on each of us, we can see something of the Creator in each of us. And it also tells us that we are the pinnacles of his creation. We're given this planet to look after, to care for. And we can see from what's going on that we've not done an amazing job at it. Whether it's climate change, global warming, deforestation, loss of habitats, extinction of species, pollution, we can see that things are not quite as they should be. And of course, war reminds us of that. It reminds us that humanity has erred. It's made mistakes. St. Paul, in the very same letter that Pastor Emmanuel read from, said this sobering truth: for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Now, I know some people do worse than others. I'm not going to try and pretend we're all exactly the same on this, but we've all made mistakes. We've all done things that are wrong. We've all said, thought, or done things that we're not proud of, that have messed up relationships with other people and have meant that we're not being the people that God created us to be. And war in a horrible start sense reminds us of the mess that's been made. It also reminds us that we need to look after our veterans. those who have suffered through war, who maybe haven't paid the ultimate price, but have suffered so much from life-changing injuries, from seeing their comrades die, from being forced to commit awful acts of violence in any other time, and who are traumatized. We now have a word for that, don't we? Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and we need to do more as individuals, as a society, for the government and institutions, do more for the veterans, for those who have come back from conflict and from serving the country in the armed services. So many get into homelessness or addiction, or end up in prison, or trying to take their lives, or a combination of those. And we do need to do more to honour and respect them. But the second thing about war which speaks to us is this: sacrifice. And there's so many anecdotal stories of servicemen and women giving up their lives for their friends. There's all sorts of anecdotes about people literally diving on a grenade, a live grenade, in an enclosed space, knowing that that's the end for them, but they're going to save their comrades and their friends from being maimed or even killed, and so they die for the greater good. Those stories are heartwarming, they're inspirational, but they're also, of course, tragic. A life lost. But those sorts of stories of sacrifice remind us of what the Apostle Paul says here about people might be willing to die for someone truly good, but there was someone that was willing to die even though for those who are his enemies, and that person was Jesus Christ. And in John's Gospel, Jesus said these words, one of the biographies of his life. He said this: "My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." And so often in war we see that wonderfully exhibited. But Jesus actually said that he's the good shepherd who gives his life for the sheep. And when he says sheep, he means all of us. And he was willing to give his life, just as a shepherd in the Middle East in ancient times was willing to protect the sheep from predators which could attack him, like lions and bears. And he was willing to lay down his life. And Jesus didn't just say that, he did it. He actually went to die for us, that we might have peace with God, peace with ourselves, and peace with other people. And when he was suffering that awful execution, you know what he said? "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." And he had before him his executioners and the crowd who were baying for his blood. He even died for his enemies, that we might all be made right with God, have peace with God, and the world might be a better place, that we might know the presence of God with us. When we look at the wonderful sacrifice of our servicemen and women, it points to an even more glorious sacrifice: the fact that God himself came down among us and lived and died for us. God bless you.